Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool era has come to an end. The man who took the Red Men to the promised land of ending a 30-year-long wait for Premier League success, a Champions League winner. Before he joined, Liverpool were in their banter era, a club that would endlessly fail and be made fun of. But 9 years after building a legacy that will go down in football history, Klopp has reached his limit. It's time to say goodbye to a Premier League legend. However, what if I told you none of it would have been possible without John Lennon and Nike? Well, this is Jurgen's story. You see, Klopp had spent the vast majority of his playing career for Mainz and in 2001 was appointed their head coach. By his third season, he saw them promoted to the Bundesliga for the first time in their history. They finished 11th the next season, but later suffered relegation, yet Klopp stayed loyal. This success saw him signed by Nike after Mark Koscheke long considered if Klopp's grandiose image would suit their brand. Klopp had no interest in a big payday like most, but accepted the deal so that he could give his friend, who was a lawyer that would act as a fill-in agent and look over his contracts, the money to help fix a boat that he had that was rusting away. Little did either Klopp or Koscheke realise what this one meeting would later lead to though. Nonetheless, Klopp thought it was time for Mainz to build with a fresh vision in mind after he failed to get them promoted the next season, and so he made the tough decision to leave the club. Knowing the great job he had done for Mainz, Bayern Munich became interested in hiring him before losing out to Borussia Dortmund as he became their new boss. The man behind sealing the deal, Klopp's newest and first agent, Mark Koscheke. He had left Nike, and with the hype around Klopp only getting larger, the German knew that he needed a representative, and there was only one man he wanted. In spite of this, Dortmund's new appointment was met with confusion at the time, seeing as despite Klopp succeeding with a very little budget at Mainz, taking on the task of managing one of Germany's biggest clubs was a whole other business. Nonetheless, he took a struggling Dortmund, who finished 13th the year before, to Bundesliga glory in just 3 seasons. In addition to winning a plethora of other domestic medals, they made it to the 2012-13 Champions League final against fierce rivals Bayern Munich. Yes, they lost, but seeing Klopp disrupt Bayern's reign was a sight many Dortmund fans cherished, even if it would all come crumbling apart after, with Klopp ultimately resigning from his position after a terrible season which at one point saw Dortmund second bottom of the league table. In his own words, Klopp went on a sabbatical in the summer of 2015 to escape management for a while. In spite of this, his agent Koscheke was working hard. Phone call after phone call, he was trying to get his client the best job he could in the background. One of the contacts Koscheke had that he got in touch with was Chelsea, but the one that caught the most interest was Liverpool. At the time, they were seemingly going nowhere with Brendan Rodgers, and so Liverpool kept their options open. Koscheke wanted to know about the club's structure and owners. For example, who was Michael Edwards and what did he do? Whilst he didn't hold the title of sporting director officially, Koscheke realised that that's what he was. Another person of interest was Ian Ayer, since he was probably going to be the first point of contact should a deal for Klopp be decided. Ian's reputation online was far from positive after overseeing some of Liverpool's biggest flopped deals. Nonetheless, Klopp and Koscheke felt that it was important for them to form their own opinion on Ian, and so a meeting was scheduled. It was an interview for Klopp to get the Liverpool job as much as it was for Liverpool to impress Klopp. They'd link up in New York, where Klopp met with FSG's Mike Gordon, who led Liverpool's day-to-day business. Both Klopp and him hit it off immediately, sharing stories of their upbringings. The German explained how he was impressed by Liverpool's structure, but believed that there were too many injuries, which was a key reason behind them not being able to reach the next stage of their project, something Klopp swore to change. By the end of their meeting, Gordon had made his mind up on the next Liverpool manager. Despite meeting with Carlo Ancelotti a week earlier, Gordon told John W. Henry of FSG that Jurgen Klopp was the man to take them to new heights. And it's safe to say, he wasn't wrong. 3 years earlier, FSG had to work hard to convince Brendan Rodgers to take the Liverpool job, whereas for Klopp it couldn't have been easier. As he walked around Central Park, across Strawberry Fields and towards the Dakota building where John Lennon once lived, Klopp realised the importance and reach Liverpool as a city had on the world, making his decision to join a piece of cake. He immediately knew that he was stepping foot in an institution that far surpassed just football. He stepped into living history. Roll on October of the 2015-16 season, and Klopp from day one injected a culture change at Liverpool. He wanted every team they came up against to hate playing Klopp's men. To do this, Liverpool needed to run further and faster than their opponents. And so Klopp went to work implementing his high-octane pressing tactics that saw him earn praise in Germany. That wasn't all though. Klopp knew that his project was a long one, and for it to be a great success, every member of the club from all departments needed to know one another and become a tight-knit family. Ever since Klopp realised he'd be taking over as manager, he watched back 12 months worth of games from before him. He came to the conclusion that whilst there was clear talent in the squad, the overall confidence level stopped them from performing at their highest ability. Klopp's way to change this was simple: knuckle down and work hard. Holiday time was reduced and training became more intense all overnight. It began to pay off as well, as within the first 6 weeks, Klopp's men beat both the champions Chelsea and runners-up Man City away from home. Throughout that season, Liverpool got close to tasting trophies, but ultimately lost on penalties to Man City in the League Cup. West Ham sent them out the FA Cup in the 4th round, and most notably, they faced Sevilla in the Europa League final to round out the season. Ultimately, the club's first loss in the competition happened to come in that game, as Liverpool failed to lift the trophy after losing 3-1 to who at this point are pretty much the owners of the Europa League. In the end, Klopp's first season was somewhat of a successful failure. Yes, they came close to winning 2 trophies and visibly improved massively on the pitch, but they fell incredibly short in the Premier League as they finished 8th. Regardless, there was no panic. When Klopp signed, he gave himself and the club 4 years to return back to winning titles. If anything, this was a vast overachievement considering the squad he had was far from his final vision. The club needed a total reset and would take baby steps, which was evident following the celebrations in front of the Kop end following a 2-2 draw with West Brom. Whilst it's easy to look at a moment like this and just joke about how far Liverpool had fallen, it was also a moment that connected the fans back with the club. This ended up having a huge positive effect as the fans returned to being Liverpool's 12th man, as seen during the comeback against Dortmund, which Klopp said was the best 30 minutes of football he had ever had. This is in stark contrast to Klopp's second home game in charge against Crystal Palace in November 2015, where with just 8 minutes left to go, Liverpool conceded, causing fans to leave the stadium early, with Klopp admitting that he felt alone. However, it was time for him to be cutthroat. Despite the close bonds he had built with his squad being an integral part of this minor success, he couldn't allow it to be something that also held them back. And so, despite players like Benteke calling Klopp a great friend, he was sold. Sacco was another. Klopp was a big fan of his. However, Sacco had missed a flight to a game as well as failed a drugs test, which led to Klopp questioning the player's professionalism. Thus, he was another player sold so that Klopp could build his own team. Klopp's ability and freedom to do this was huge, and I could not understate enough just how vital it was for the future success of the club that he was allowed to move such players on. This is because for the first time since 2004, both the board and manager were on the same page with acquiring the right targets and building a suitable squad. When a club falls from grace, an inability to pinpoint a proper transfer strategy is often the heart of that club's problems. One look at Manchester United makes that apparent, and even more recently you could argue the same could now be said for Chelsea. That being said, that doesn't just mean you bend over backwards for what Klopp wants.
Don't bend over! For crying out loud, what are you not?
Like I said, both the board and manager need to be on the same page in order for the club to sustain their longevity. Because of this, a healthy debate is often required to ensure the correct transfer target is acquired. One of the best examples when it comes to Liverpool is the time Jurgen Klopp wanted to sign Julian Brandt, but was persuaded by Michael Edwards to push for a certain Mohamed Salah instead. What's more is that because Liverpool and Klopp were on the same page with their vision for the future, they didn't feel pressured into wasting the money they had received for Philippe Coutinho either. Klopp believed that Coutinho, despite his talent, was an issue for the team. They were so used to relying on him to attack that by accepting his transfer request and moving him on would force the rest of the squad to step up and step out of their comfort zone. In the past, they had failed to replace the stars they had sold by overpaying for mediocre replacements. For example, Andy Carroll was brought in for Fernando Torres and later Mario Balotelli for Luis Suarez. What's more is that when they did reinvest the money they got for Coutinho, they didn't try and replace him in a like-for-like fashion. After all, if they brought in another £100 million midfielder to take his place, then the other players would just fall back into bad habits of relying on him to create for them. Instead, Klopp reinvented the attack entirely so that the responsibility was now shared. Enter the now iconic front three of Sadio Mane, Roberto Firmino and Mohamed Salah. It's safe to say that this mini rebuild of Klopp's worked out. That year, Liverpool scored 135 goals in all competitions, with their brand new front three contributing to an incredible 91 of those goals. This amount of goals had only been beaten once in the club's entire history, with Salah setting a new record of 32 goals over a 38 Premier League game season. The lack of creativity and over-reliance on a single player in attack had now been fixed, meaning that Klopp and Liverpool could move on to the next area of importance, the defence. The solution? Virgil van Dijk. However, it wasn't so simple. The transfer was soaked in drama that delayed the Dutchman's impact by 6 months. 5 days before Liverpool agreed a fee with Barcelona for Coutinho, they had agreed a £75 million deal for Southampton centre-back Virgil van Dijk. Laporte, Koulibaly and Boateng were also considered, but with Liverpool now being in a position where they could spend big, they got the man they wanted. It wouldn't have been possible without Klopp either, as both Chelsea and Man City were after Van Dijk at the time too. Nonetheless, Klopp labelled the centre-back a game changer and made it clear how much he wanted him at the club, which swayed Van Dijk to choose the Red Men over anyone else. It was June 2017 and he was ready to move. However, the transfer window came to a close and the Dutchman remained in Southampton. The reason being was that Klopp and the player met in private in Blackpool. This infuriated Southampton, who believed Klopp had been illegally tapping their player up as official negotiations between both clubs hadn't taken place yet. This led to involvement from the Premier League and ultimately the panic button to be pressed by Liverpool, who issued a public apology, explaining that they ended any and all interest in the player. Me when I lie. Klopp knew that Van Dijk was worth waiting for, and so Gordon worked behind the scenes to repair the relationship with Southampton, and 6 months later than planned, one of the most transformative signings in Premier League history was made. The price at the time was a world record fee for a centre-back, but in hindsight can only be looked at as a bargain. His first game was a fierce derby versus Everton in the FA Cup where, bang, he headed in the match winner in front of the Kop. He couldn't have asked for a better start. Straight away, Klopp ensured Van Dijk became part of the Liverpool family as he jetted off to Dubai with the rest of the squad as part of a bonding trip where Sadio Mane mentioned how in that short time, Van Dijk grew so close to everyone to the point that it was like they knew each other for years. Simon Mignolet also mentioned how Virgil gave the whole team a massive lift the moment he walked through the door, which probably explains why he later went on to become club captain. Unfortunately for Liverpool though, there was still one missing piece to the puzzle. It was May 26th, 2018. Champions League final, Liverpool v Real Madrid. Salah was taken off injured after a questionable tackle from Sergio Ramos, and the night just seemed to get worse from there. In the end, they lost 3-1 after the goalkeeper Karius let in a multitude of errors, giving Real Madrid the dub. Franz Beckenbauer called Klopp 4 days after the final, letting him know that Karius had suffered a concussion just before he made the first mistake of the game. Brain scans showed that Karius had visual spatial dysfunction, which can result in an inability to judge where objects are. Out of 30 markers for concussion, Liverpool said that test results showed Karius had 26 of them. This ultimately led to a rule change which introduced the concussion substitute, something I talked about in my video about 9 players that forced football to change the rules, link in the description. Nonetheless, this, combined with a huge lack of confidence Karius now had, forced Klopp to make a decision he didn't want to make. The human side of Klopp wanted to give Karius the opportunity to come back stronger, but the winner in him realised that they had to move on and upgrade. Thus, the club turned their attention to Alisson. Early talks with Roma ended prematurely with them proposing a Salah tax, causing Liverpool to walk away after being quoted £90 million. However, talks continued until mid-July, as Klopp, much like with Van Dijk, was determined to get his man despite links to Jack Butland and Nick Pope. Eventually, Roma dropped the price down to 65 million, which is unfortunate for them, as had they just waited it out for just 3 weeks more, they'd have had the transfer of Kepa to use as a bargaining chip for why they were demanding such a high price for their keeper. With this move though, the final piece of the puzzle was added to Klopp's men. Alisson won the Premier League Golden Glove and was crowned Goalkeeper of the Year by both UEFA and FIFA. In fact, he was so good that Klopp said that he'd have paid double if he knew. I'm sure Roma would still be open to that offer, Jurgen. Anyway, the 2018-19 season rolled around and Liverpool finally ended their 7-year trophy drought. The club enjoyed a massive Champions League run, beating the likes of Bayern Munich and of course Barcelona on their way to the final. Liverpool have a history of iconic comebacks, but the one against Barca was one of the best, with Origi's corner-taken quickly goal being voted Liverpool's greatest ever goal in 2022. This incredible Champions League comeback paralleled Tottenham's incredible win over Ajax, also in the semi-final, setting the stage for one of the most boring Champions League finals of all time. Nonetheless, Liverpool fans didn't care one bit, as they got to indulge in the excitement of being crowned European champions and enjoying the first trophy of Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool era as the players threw their manager into the air. However, as great as all this was, there was still one trophy that Liverpool wanted more than any other: the Premier League. That season, Liverpool had amassed a record-breaking 97 points for the club, yet still they lost out by a single point to Manchester City. Thus, Klopp had a mission. As he himself said, that was our first chance to win it, not the last. The following pre-season saw the players thrown straight back into triple training sessions. It's reported that after one training session, the players collapsed to the floor just before lunch, to which Klopp simply said, "If you're tired now, boys, just you wait till later." In the summer of 2018, Klopp began to identify an issue he had noticed with the squad. He came from Germany and took the league by storm with his high-intensity, fast, entertaining style of play. However, they needed to evolve and play with more control if they were going to keep up with City and win the title. Teams would begin to target the front three of Liverpool to keep them quiet, meaning Klopp also needed to find other ways to attack. And so, set pieces became a focus, especially with the aerial prowess of Virgil van Dijk and the magical cross of Trent Alexander-Arnold. Safe to say it worked too, as that season they scored the most set-piece goals in the league with 29. That wasn't all though. They went full throttle with the data-driven micromanaging to ensure that they got all the help they could get by employing a throw-in specialist named Gronemark to help ensure that they kept control of the ball each time. He went on to say how such a position in football was often scoffed at by most clubs, and that Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool were the first to realise the potential of such a skill. The air in Liverpool had now changed entirely. Before, they would nearly win something and then, rather than build on that failure, they'd regress further. This time though, following their European success, Klopp told the team, "Let's be greedy." Early in the 2019-20 season, Liverpool secured the Super Cup title and later the Club World Cup thanks to their Champions League success, taking Jurgen's total trophies won up to 3 in just the span of half a year or so. They broke a record that season too, being the fastest team in English top-flight history to reach 30 league wins, taking just 34 games. They also enjoyed the best ever start by any team in Europe's top 5 leagues, taking home an insane 79 points out of the 81 on offer at the time. It took just 31 games for them to seal the title, meaning they also broke the English top flight record by winning it with 7 games left to play. In total, they bagged 99 points as Klopp achieved the impossible feat of ending Liverpool's 30-year league title drought. It was such a historic moment for the club that even club legend Steven Gerrard stated that Jurgen Klopp needed his own statue at the club. Unfortunately though, this all feels like a distant memory now for Klopp's men. The previous season, they were 2 wins away from becoming the first team in English history to win the quadruple, yet the 2021 season sent Liverpool back a number of years on their path to what should have been football domination. So, what went wrong? Firstly, clubs around them also began to step it up. Spurs appointed Jose Mourinho, United decided to turn up for a season, and City, well, they just continued being City. One of the biggest issues, however, was a terrible injury suffered to their rock at the back, Virgil van Dijk. As Klopp said when they signed him, he was a game changer, and losing him only went to further prove that point. In fact, injuries got so bad that it saw the likes of Fabinho and even Jordan Henderson having to fill in at centre-back sometimes. This of course had a drastic knock-on effect for the rest of the squad as well. If two of your most important midfielders are having to cover for two of your most important defenders being missing, then someone else important has to fill in for them. It was a constant merry-go-round of who do I have left to play where for Klopp? One that disrupted any and all rhythm Liverpool had been working on in the years prior. Even the players they bought in to try and add squad depth ended up needing replacements, with the likes of Thiago and Jota missing 20 plus games each. Naby Keita was another player bought in who practically never played for Liverpool. Like I said, one of the most important things for Klopp's team was organisation, intensity and understanding of where every player on the pitch would be. But the teams he was left with to put out each game were no longer that same team. It was an endless mess of confusion, leading to an incredibly disappointing season for the club, one that they're still in the recovery stages of. They'd go on to pick up the Carabao Cup and FA Cup the following season, however it still felt like Liverpool had more building to do. The likes of Mane and Firmino had gone. Van Dijk, while still great, never quite hit the unfathomably high standards that he had set pre-injury, and signings such as Thiago with his constant injuries and Arthur Melo, who was one of the most pointless signings in the club's history, alongside missing out on prime targets like Bellingham and Tchouaméni, all culminated in a struggling rebuild for the club. It's things like this that have resulted in Klopp making his decision to stand down. He himself mentioned how it all dawned upon him during a meeting to plan for the next transfer window, how he no longer had the energy left in him to continue finding these missing pieces for the puzzle. However, had it not been for his wife, he'd have left even a year earlier. The only other trophy Liverpool managed to grab during their rebuilding phase was the Community Shield. That being said, the news of Klopp's decision to leave will undoubtedly light a fire in the hearts of every player and fan, which I wouldn't be surprised help carry them to even more success this season, be it the Premier League or even just the Europa League. After all, I think it'd be poetic if in Klopp's final game for the club, he lifted the trophy he failed to win during his first season there, making it the final trophy to complete his collection. Now, I've tried to be as unbiased as possible in this video, but as a United fan, it's time for me to admit that as much as I'm gonna miss his character, God, I'm glad he's leaving. And if that isn't proof enough of the incredible job he's done at Liverpool, I don't know what is. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please click the one on your screen right now, and also if you haven't already, ding that notification bell.